Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Behind the Mic for this Friday, July 2nd. I'm your host, Jonathan Hodgson, back with you here on ASTV Productions, ready for another conversation with another great sportscaster. Many thanks for joining us wherever you're tuned in from this evening and making us part of your Friday evening. We'll be spending the next hour with GREGG CASERTA, the play-by-play voice of the Trenton Thunder, and for 2021, the Buffalo Bisons, AAA affiliate of the Toronto Blue Jays. There's a unique story that goes into that, and the opportunity that Greg has to call the Blue Jays AAA club this season, while the Blue Jays Major League team is occupying Sahlen Field in Buffalo. We'll get into the unique aspect of that story and what all has gone into that from Greg's perspective. And he's also had a big accomplishment this year, earlier this month, filled in for Howie Rose on the New York Mets radio broadcast for a weekend. So we'll talk to Greg about his MLB debut on the airwaves, and we'll broaden it out to talk a little bit about his journey through the minor leagues. He's worked his way up just about every level of minor league baseball after graduating from Fordham University. We'll get into some of his stories and experiences, have some fun with that, before having a little bit more fun in the final block, talking about different types of non-baseball assignments and opportunities that he's had. Really looking forward to this one. Greg and I've been connected for a while, so it's fun to be able to collaborate on something finally together here. So before we go to our first break here on Behind the Mic and bring in Greg on the other side, we'll remind you to visit us online at astvproductions.com. That's where you'll find our live shows and all of our archives, as well as all of our other shows here at ASTV and our live game broadcasts. We're simulcast every Friday on Facebook, and you can also follow our further updates over on Twitter at Amateur Sports TV. So we're going to toss it to a break, and we'll be back on the other side with GREGG CASERTA, the voice of the Trenton Thunder, and in 2021, the Buffalo Bisons. Thanks for joining us. We'll be right back. And once again, welcome back to Behind the Mic here on ASTV. Jonathan Hodgson, joined this week by our guest, GREGG CASERTA, from the Trenton Thunder and the Buffalo Bisons. Greg, thanks so much for coming on.
It is my pleasure, my friend. It's good to connect after all these years. To actually be on a screen together and talk face-to-face like this is really nice. Like you said in your very nice and very complimentary intro, we have been connected for several years. And obviously, we talked about it before we came on. Lost touch there for a little while, but now we're back. And like I said, it's really good to see you, John.
Yeah, and both ways. And I know soon after the COVID situation started out last spring, I had a conversation with one of my broadcasting friends from the hockey world, Peter Labardius, who does Flames games now. And we just talked about using the extra time that we were going to have. We didn't know it was going to be 15 months, but using the extra time that we had to find creative ways to get better and find ways to reconnect with people. And that's something that this show has afforded me the opportunity to call up people like yourself and say, hey, do you want to talk about yourself for an hour? And that's been one of the positive things that's come out of this. So, and I've in getting ready for this show, I've listened to some things you've done with Around the Nest with the Blue Jays broadcasters. So the networking with other play-by-play guys is part of the fun.
Yeah, and I think going beyond that, and you're absolutely right. And I think what you said about doing something creative and trying to fill that void during the pandemic, I think it also, in a way, is therapeutic because, as you know, you talk to enough broadcasters, like you joked, and you're right, we're all egomaniacs in some way. So any chance we get to talk about ourselves where we're not in a social situation and it's something like this, a lot of us are willing to do it. So obviously I was happy to oblige and do this with you. But I also found that during the pandemic, I felt that just talking to people off the air, talking to people on the phone was really therapeutic because we needed to pick each other up. I think for a lot of us, we had some really dark days. I know I had my share. I know that people in the business that I'm friends with outside of the working environment, sometimes we would just talk on the phone once a week. It became a weekly tradition and it helped us. Sometimes I needed it more than him. Sometimes he needed it more than me. But at the end of the day, it was something that we did to help each other. And I think that this is just an extension of that with a live mic and a live camera. And I think it's helpful in more ways than one.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's I feel for broadcasters and for athletes, it was kind of a similar situation of we all had our conventional ways of doing things taken away for a while, and we're still slowly getting it all back. But it was who's going to be creative and find new ways to do things. Who's going to who's going to invest on finding ways to get better so that when we do get games back, we can hit the ground running.
I don't know if you've had Ben Wagner on your show, but I think he'd be a great fit because, again, it stays in line with the Blue Jays. And I've gotten a chance to know him this year, and I knew his story previously because he was a guy similar to me that worked his way up through the minors, spent a long time in Buffalo, finally got a chance with Toronto. And unfortunately, since they've moved away from a traditional radio broadcast, they're now going simulcast this season. That kind of left him without a defined role. But he said to me a couple of weeks ago, it was hard for him at first to accept that realization, but in a way, like you just touched on, it's been good for him. It's been helpful for him to branch out. He's doing more stuff with their television broadcast. He's doing more stuff on Sportsnet's digital platform. So yeah, a lot of it is adapting. And for me, my adaptation was unfortunately being out of the game for a year plus, not being able to broadcast. I had to pivot and work in an Amazon warehouse where I was unloading trucks. I was there from March of 2020 to March of this year. I had never had a real job before. Every job I've ever had has been in TV and radio. And so you use the word adaptation. It's exactly right. I had to do it professionally. I just wasn't able to do it within the business that I grew up in.
Yeah, for sure. And Ben Wagner's story would be a great one. Of course, definitely very familiar with him, but haven't had the chance to connect with him as of yet. But being a big Blue Jays fan myself, I've seen lots of his work. Being a field reporter for the Blue Jays TV right now with Buck Martinez, Dan Schulman, Pat Tabler on the calls of those games. And you're back at it, as we've alluded to a few times already. You're back at it. Probably not how anybody envisioned it in more ways than one. Coming out of COVID, and you're back behind the mic, working for the Trenton Thunder, but calling Buffalo Bisons games. For people that don't follow the Blue Jays regularly and aren't as familiar with the situation, give us the nuts and bolts on what has you working for the Thunder and calling Bisons games.
So obviously with Toronto being unable to return because of the border restrictions, this is the second straight season that they're playing at Sahlen Field in Buffalo. Therefore, the Buffalo Bisons, their AAA affiliate, needed a home. And last year, with no minor league season, that wasn't an issue. The Blue Jays played there. The Bisons didn't have a season. This year, the Bisons needed a home, and the Trenton Thunder had that home. We have provided it for them for the entire season. We have been saying all along, we don't know how long they will be here. It's all contingent on what happens at the border. If Toronto decides to reopen things tomorrow, they would have to finish their homestand with us, but then they would be back as soon as they can make it work logistically. So when I was hired back in April, I was fully anticipating to be broadcasting Trenton Thunder Draft League games. Obviously, everybody knew about them losing their longtime Yankees affiliation, part of that inaugural season of the Draft League, which is now a college entry-level league for draft-eligible players. And it was something that, okay, let's just get back, like you said, behind the mic and do it. Let's just re-enter that field and that world, and let's have some fun with it and see where it takes us. And when I had my first phone call with Jeff Hurley, my general manager, back in late March, early April, he said, hey, we've got some things in the works here. And he told me about this plan. They still had to finalize the details. But we've had AAA baseball in Trenton ever since opening day on May 4th. The team's playing well. It's a great group of guys. It's my first year with any sort of Blue Jays involvement. Our coaching staff has been terrific. I think, as I'm sure you've talked to a lot of people, the biggest challenge this year, John, is not being able to go down into the clubhouse. So my interactions with them have basically been in passing. I'll kind of wave to them as they're walking into the building. We do our interviews over Zoom, both pregame and postgame. So for me, the biggest thing is that I can't get to know the guys personally the way I would in the past. That's frustrating, but it's also something that I knew was going to be an issue coming in. And we've been able to overcome those obstacles. And here we are with, at least from our end, with our team, no COVID-related stoppages. And everybody's healthy and everybody's just happy to be back out. No masks at Trenton Thunder Ballpark, no limitations there. So like you said, slowly but surely going back to normalcy.
And you mentioned the Trenton Thunder, formerly the longtime AAA partner of the Yankees, and Double-A, sorry, and longtime partner of the Yankees, and now they're hosting a Blue Jays affiliate. And a couple of weeks back, I saw a picture from Trenton Thunder Ballpark that still had some of the great former Thunder who have gone on to star with the Yankees still have their big posters up on the facing of the stadium overlooking the field. Have you been able to gauge how the fan base there in Trenton has received hosting the Blue Jays this summer after being a Yankees team for so long?
It's a great question. And I think early on, there were obviously some head scratching that had to go on because people didn't really quite get it. So you're not with the Yankees anymore. Now you're with the Blue Jays. Yes, we're with the Blue Jays, but only temporarily. And then you get more follow-up questions. How long is that going to be for? Well, we don't know yet. Do you have any idea? No, we still don't have an idea. So yeah, there was a feeling out process. And I think for a lot of people, especially the season ticket holders, there's a lingering sting of the Yankees not being there anymore. I think in an ideal world that nothing would have changed, but obviously a lot did over the last couple of years. So it was definitely took some getting used to, but at the same time, I think so many people are just happy to be back out, getting out of their homes, going back out and feeling normal again. I think for people to be able to shed a mask and not have to worry about it, feeling around in their pocket to see if they brought it in from the car, people going to just grab a beer and a hot dog, enjoying a nice night. I know right now with the heat wave out west, that seems like a foreign thought. But on a nice night when it's cool out, people miss that sort of stuff. It's the kind of thing that last June, last July, we were wondering, okay, it's not happening this year, but will it happen next year? We didn't know. We didn't have a time frame for any of that. And we got through it quicker than a lot of us expected. And yeah, it was a year away. It was a very difficult 2020, but now that we're back in 2021, really doesn't feel a whole lot different to me.
And I wanted to ask you a couple of questions about the team that you've been calling for this season and what you've seen out of the Bison/Thunder. They still wear their Thunder uniforms for home games. For those of us who follow the Blue Jays on the major league level regularly, We've quickly gotten to know Alek Manoah. He's acclimatized himself fairly well to the major leagues. Some good ones, some not so good ones. A little bit of controversy there a couple of starts ago against the Orioles. He pitched in 3 games at AAA before coming up this season, 2 games in Trenton. What did you see from Alek Manoah when you called him?
Well, first and foremost, it's funny that we're going to talk about him. And the first thing I was about to say was he's a really good guy. He's one of the nicest guys I've ever been around. And while we're recording this, he's serving a 5-game suspension. So I know that there's a little hypocrisy there. But going back to that instance in Baltimore, the pitch that he threw that hit Michael Franco, I think everybody realized, like, all right, come on. There have been things that have happened on a ball field where guys have not gotten suspended for far worse. So let's put that aside. Your question about what I saw from him, I saw a guy that I've been saying it all along, forced the Blue Jays' hand. They had no choice but to call him up. And like you said, there's been ups and downs as a rookie for him. His debut start was part of that doubleheader against the Yankees, and he had 6 shutout innings. I think he struck out 7. He was spectacular. And then his next start was a little bit bumpy, and then he picked it back up. And you're going to see that because we talk about him as a rookie, but this is a guy that was only drafted in 2019. So one of the byproducts of that missed 2020 season is that minor league player evaluations have been very inconsistent because a lot of guys got their clocks sped up. Guys that probably should have spent more time at the lower levels bypassed them altogether. Guys that should have spent time in AAA didn't spend very long there. And so if he does hit a bump in the road, people are going to say, you got to send him back down. He wasn't ready. These are the same people that after 3 starts at AAA needed him in the Blue Jays rotation. Now, what helps him and what speeds him up this year is the fact that the Blue Jays have been as ravaged by injury as any other team in baseball right now. So that's certainly helped. But what I saw from him in those 2 starts was utter dominance. He made AAA lineups look absolutely stupid. And so I was really disappointed to see him go because I got to know him a little bit, and I really liked having Alek around. Selfishly, I love watching him pitch. I love getting to know him. But I also told him, I said, listen, don't come back here. We don't want you back here in AAA. Stay up there. Keep doing your thing. And I think in the end, he's going to be just fine. They just have to ride those highs and lows that you get with rookies.
And how about a guy like Nate Pearson? He's been the top prospect for 2 or 3 years now. Big time expectations at the major league level. He's been up at various points the last couple of years with Toronto, but just hasn't stuck yet. Adding to a little bit of injury issues here and there. I believe he's currently on the 7-day DL or IL down in AAA. Do you have any insights into how Nate Pearson is doing with his process? Can that get a little bit frustrating for a guy who has big expectations, but takes time, as it's taken some time for him to try to find traction at the major league level?
Yeah, you kind of hit on every point there, John. And right now, like you said, he is on the 7-day IL. It's a groin injury. The good news is that he is with the team. So my guess is that they're going to work him through this week, see how he responds to treatment and things like that. I don't think he'll be back on the mound this week as they return home to face the Iron Pigs for a 6-game series. But the fact that he's still with the team is very encouraging. That being said, you can't talk about Nate Pearson without mentioning the injuries. Some of it's bad luck. Some of it's unfortunate, but it's very frustrating for a guy that when you see him at his best, he's dominant. You see the high strikeout totals. That's been his MO for as long as he's been in the system. But it seems like every year something happens to him, and that delays a little bit more. And listen, he's still a young guy. He's only 24. He's still one of the top pitching prospects in all of baseball. He is still going to be a part of this team's rotation down the road, but they've got to get him healthy. They need him to get innings, and they need him to just be more consistent because he throws a lot of pitches. He racks up strikeouts, so that adds to the pitch total. But he also has 1 bad inning in a lot of his starts, and that kind of skews the final line. So when you evaluate him purely from a numbers standpoint, and unfortunately, that's what a lot of people can only glean off of him because they're not watching his starts in depth the way some of us are. the stat lines don't really tell you the whole story, because you see, okay, 4 innings, 7 or 8 strikeouts, and now 3 or 4 runs. Now, what happened in that 1 inning? Loses control of the fastball, gets into some deep counts, runs through the lineup a little bit more than he has to, doesn't have a lot of clean innings. So yeah, there's work to be done, but the key is getting him back on the field and making sure that he's ready to go every 5th day. And especially this year, it's his second IL stint. And especially coming back from 2020, when he only had that brief cameo with Toronto late in the season, part of that was interrupted by injury. So it's been stop and go for a guy that needs to figure it out. The key right now, let's go one step at a time. Let's get him healthy and make sure he stays that way.
For sure. And turning it back on you for one more thing before we go to our next break here on Behind the Mic. You've had a big accomplishment earlier this season, getting on the Mets radio broadcast earlier in June. Mets and Padres making your Major League Baseball debut on radio. Take me through, what's the call-up story for a radio broadcaster?
So the call-up story was, our season began on May 4th, and the night before our opening day, I got a call from Ray Martell, the Mets executive producer on the radio side. He's a friend, has been for a long time. And he said, leave these dates open on June 4th and 5th. I'm trying to get you in. We might need to fill in. Now, I've gone through this process before, not just with him, but you apply for jobs and you're in the discussion and then it just doesn't work out for whatever reason. And so I've always said to him, I said, listen, my dates are always open for you. I understand that we have games in Trenton on June 4th and 5th, but I'm ready when you need me. I have been ready when you need me. Let's, we'll see what happens. But I wasn't banking on it. And then we had our opening day on May 4th. And as you know, having experienced it, stuff always goes wrong on opening day. It doesn't matter where it is. It could be the printer not working down in the office. It could be the radio equipment not working and not getting on the air in time for the pregame show. It was a typical opening day. It's also my first game in a new city with a new organization. And then you throw in the Bisons coming to town, my first game at AAA. We made it through. Broadcast went really well. First time back on the air since September of 2019 doing a baseball game. And so I went to bed happy that night. May 5th, I wake up and Ray sends me a text in the morning and he says, stay by your phone today. I said, well, okay. And I was having breakfast at home and I thought, that's interesting. So I texted my dad. I said, hey, I got this text. We might be getting some good news today. And so a couple of hours later, I'm constantly looking at the phone. I'm checking, making sure I didn't miss anything. And he calls me up and he says, I have bad news and good news. He says, the bad news is that you have to miss your games in Trenton on June 4th and 5th. The good news is that you're going to be doing the games with us when the Mets play the Padres. And that's when I kind of just lost feeling, lost my words, you name it. All I could say was thank you to him. When I hung up the phone, I've told this story on Around the Nest, the Blue Jays minor league podcast. The high point for me, aside from the accomplishment of getting through those 2 games and being really happy with how they came out, and more importantly, the Mets people being really happy with how they came out, was when I got to FaceTime my parents. My parents work together. My dad's a dentist, so I usually don't bother him during the day because I know he's seeing patients. But when I FaceTime them, he had the iPad screen, and my mom was kind of in frame too. And I just started crying. I said, we're going to the show. And I broke down, and it was 10 years of minor league baseball and therapy sessions and crying and anger and rejection and tears, wanting to quit, wanting to roll over. It was all of those emotions that finally culminated into everything that I worked for, that my family helped me work for. And to be able to share that news with them, I'm amazed they didn't break down. I thought my mom would cry for sure, but I did all the crying for the entire family. And I wish I could replay that moment because I don't like to cry. But in that situation, it was just the sweetest feeling in the world. And it's something that I will cherish for the rest of my life.
That's fantastic. And one of the nuances with your debut was you called the games from Citi Field, and it was being played in Petco Park because of the changes this year. What was that like what was your experience calling games off monitors?
So I had never done it before, and I was actually with the Bisons just a few days prior. They were on the road in Scranton, and they had a really good TV feed there. And I wanted to actually practice it for a few innings on the air, but there was a slight delay between the television feed and the live game action, so I couldn't really do it. So I didn't really know what to expect going in. I was actually jaded on the whole process because I had heard about a lot of the technical difficulties that could arise. Having done several hundred games from behind home plate in the press box, it's a completely different vantage point. But then I got there and I saw what I'd be doing. I'm watching the one screen to the left, which is your center field camera, basically what you'd watch at home. And then the television to the right of that is your high nine, which basically shows the entire diamond. It allows you to survey the defense, lets you watch the runners in motion and things like that. Once the game started, I was very comfortable with it. I actually enjoyed it because it reminded me of being home and watching the game on my living room couch. So for me, it was very relaxed. Getting a chance to do the games with Ed Coleman and Wayne Randazzo was a treat. They made me feel very comfortable and very welcome. And like I said, it couldn't have gone better. Would I have preferred for there to be 35,000 people at Citi Field? Yeah. Do I think it'll happen again? Yeah. And when it does happen the next time, I hope there are fans in the stands. But if it's not and it's another TV deal, I'm okay with it because I actually had a really good time doing it.
Fantastic. All right. We got to take our first break here on Behind the Mic, and we'll be right back on the other side of a message here on ASTVProductions.com.
Welcome to Pilot Mountain Hockey Academy, your world-class academic and hockey training facility created to maximize each student's athletic and academic potential. Blackjack Stewart Arena, home of the Buffalo, is inside the 46,000 square foot complex, as well as a curling rink and other facilities. The students have a unique combination of successful, well-rounded education at Pilot Mountain Collegiate Institute and the professional hockey training in an encouraging community. The years of experience of on-ice coaching propel our students to the next level, both mentally and physically, in a professional environment.
Again, welcome back to Behind the Mic here on ASTVProductions.com. Jonathan Hodgson with you in conversation this week with GREGG CASERTA from the Trenton Thunder and calling Buffalo Bisons games this year. We went through that experience in the first block, calling Bisons games for the Thunder, while the Blue Jays have kicked the Bisons out of their home field because of not being able to get back into Canada due to COVID yet. And then we had a little bit of fun recounting your debut on the New York Mets radio broadcast. And now I wanted to go a little bit more big picture on your career because in that talk about your major league debut, you referenced the experiences of the time you've spent in minor league baseball, and I haven't experienced it to your level, but I feel like I have a small idea of it, having covered a couple of the high-level summer leagues for many years, and there's a lot of grinding that goes on, a lot of sweat and tears that goes on putting time in at those levels. So I wanted to back up and kind of set the scene before we go into those and kind of get an idea of who you were early on as a baseball fan, as a sports fan. Who did you, when did baseball kind of catch your heart? Who did you cheer for? All that kind of stuff.
So for me, I was born September 16th, 88. So my earliest memories were the tail end of the 95 season going into 96. Now, I grew up in Fort Lee, New Jersey. On a good day, I could get to Yankee Stadium in probably 10 minutes. You would just take the Cross Bronx Expressway, and if you left at the right time, you could beat the rush and get there for batting practice. Now, both of my parents are from Brooklyn, New York. I did not do anything unique as a sports fan growing up. I followed whoever my dad liked. So for me, a kid that lived and still lives in Bergen County, New Jersey, I'm right outside New York City. My parents are New York born and raised. Yankees, New York Giants, New York Rangers, and at that time, the New York Knicks, because they were still watchable. So for me growing up, I was a Yankees fan. And like I said, I remember the tail end of 95, losing the division series to the Mariners. I remember seeing Griffey round the bases and score on Edgar Martinez's double down the line. My first game in 95, I went with my dad and my grandfather. We sat in the bleachers, and I remember the first home run I ever saw hit at Yankee Stadium at the old stadium was Ruben Sierra. And I'll never forget that. 96, I started to go. I was there when Darryl Strawberry hit, I think, his 300th career home run. It was a game-winning 2-run shot in the 9th inning to beat the Royals. And so those were my earliest memories. So think about it. At the height of my baseball fandom, and it's right when the dynasty is beginning. So growing up, my years watching baseball started with 4 World Series in 5 years. And I thought, it'll never get better than this. And chances are it won't. Now, I'm still a Yankees fan. Listen, I follow the teams that I've been with. I still follow the Tampa Bay Rays. I still follow the Philadelphia Phillies. The bottom line now is that when you get to know these guys, you root for the players more so the teams. But I've been to 2 Yankee games this year I've been to 3 Yankee games this year as a fan. And so I still love the game. I probably view it differently now. I'm not as gung-ho about it as I used to be, just because it is my profession, and you have to separate those things sometimes. But for me, growing up, when I did, I got to experience a very special run for those Yankees teams.
And who are some of the broadcasters that you listened to early on?
For me, baseball-wise, it was John and Michael on radio. So obviously, Michael Kay has been the TV voice of the Yankees since 2002 or whenever the Yes Network started. But for me, I listened to him on the radio, and I thought that him and John were terrific together. I remember listening to Bobby Mercer. I loved Bobby Mercer, who unfortunately passed away from cancer several years ago. But I thought he was a terrific broadcaster. And then as I got older and I got more into it, I listened to Howie Rose on the Mets radio network. So it was kind of interesting to have it come full circle, where I got a chance to text Howie after I made my debut a couple of weeks ago. And he wrote back and sent me a very nice note. And to have that come from him, I mean, that's New York royalty. That's a guy that at some point will probably win the Frick Award and get into the Baseball Hall of Fame. Gary Cohen, even as a Yankees fan, I watch Mets games because I love Gary, Keith, and Ron. But for me, to be honest, I probably identify my childhood broadcasting more with Marv Albert and Sam Rosen. Marv Albert did the Knicks games. Sam Rosen still does the Rangers games. I remember imitating Marv. Everybody used to say, yes, everybody would have their own Marv Albert, right? So I remember those guys more so than the baseball, I think, when I was a really young kid. I don't think I really knew I wanted to be a broadcaster at that point, but I sync up my childhood with probably Sam Rosen and Marv Albert. Those are the 2 voices that stand out.
So you graduated from Fordham University in 2010, alma mater of Vin Scully. How did your time there at Fordham prepare you for your career?
If you ask anybody that stayed in sports broadcasting that came out of WFUV radio, they will tell you that is the place that made it all happen. Any guy. Mike Breen would tell you that today. Ryan Rucco would tell you that today. If it's not for that radio station, it doesn't happen for a lot of us. So not only did it pique my interest in broadcasting and set me on my path, but it also gave me experiences that guys who are in college don't get to experience. I got to cover the New York Rangers as the station's beat reporter for 3 years. I got to go to the U.S. Open tennis tournament. Somebody that has no interest in tennis got to embrace that experience, and it was one of the best live events I've ever been to. In 2009, I got to cover the Yankees as one of the 2 station beat reporters. I was there for every home playoff game during that playoff run when they won the World Series. I got to go on the media float during the parade through the Canyon of Heroes. I mean, I'm a 21-year-old kid. I'm the youngest guy in that room. And what I loved about it was not only was it a memorable experience, because, yeah, those were my local teams. There are experiences that not a lot of people get to have. A lot of people wish they could, and I got to have them and get paid for it in college. And I think what it allowed me to do, John, more than anything, is that it got me prepared for those moments. It didn't allow me to get too amped up. It didn't allow me to get so impressed by what was going on, because I told myself back then, this is the start of something for me. Being on that float, being in those clubhouses, these moments are not too big for me. I can do this. And I think it gave me the confidence to continue forward, even though, yes, like you touched on before, there's a lot of sweat and tears that go into it. There are bumps and bruises along the way, but you have to battle that early adversity. And if you continue to battle it, it helps you come out on the other side. And I had those conversations early on at Fordham where I had to question whether if this was what I really wanted to do or not. And it gave me the building blocks for where I am today.
And one thing I wanted to ask you about, I believe it was during your Fordham years. You can correct me if I'm mistaken, but you were part of a project with one of your colleagues on a project called Ernie Harwell, a friend, our friend in the booth. You won a couple of awards with that, along with Dan Obermuller, who did it with you. Tell us about the inspiration for that project and what that project was about.
So Dano and I were classmates, and he was the other Yankees beat reporter. So he and I were very good friends in college. I'm not sure if he's still in the business. He was for a while working at CBS and with Westwood One. He was always a behind the scenes guy, but he and I always got along. We collaborated on a lot of things together. And to be honest, the whole genesis of that project was his idea. He just asked me to do the voiceover for it. He knew that I was a broadcaster like you. I was a broadcaster junkie. So he thought that I might be a good person to narrate that project. I had spoken to Ernie once before because he gave a presentation to us over the phone at WFUV where he called in and did an hour-long workshop. So we got a chance to speak with him one day, and it was really special because he was such a nice guy over the phone. A lot of us knew about his work and what he was like on the air, but to hear him off the air, just to talk to us, it was almost like having your grandfather speak to you. So when Dan approached me with this idea to do the VO for it, I don't think I had ever really done sound tracking before. I might have done it a couple of times, but it was my first time getting in a booth, reading a script, having to do multiple takes. I love the experience. I haven't really gotten a chance to do it a lot since then. But then when we won a couple of awards, it was like, wait, did we really just do this? And it's something that I wish that I could remember what that process was like, because in the moment, I really enjoyed it. And then to have the accolades from it afterwards, it's pretty cool to celebrate now.
Now, that's really cool for me to hear about that. Of course, Ernie Harwell, the late, great Hall of Fame voice of the Detroit Tigers. And he was one of the major influences for my number one influence, Jerry Howarth, who did the Toronto Blue Jays on radio for 36 seasons, a couple of World Series alongside Tom Cheek. And I remember some of the special experiences that I've been able to have with Jerry when I was a bit younger. And he would talk about Ernie to me. So that was really cool to hear about that. And so after you graduated from Fordham, before you got into affiliated ball, there was a summer in the New England Collegiate Summer League, and then a year with the St. Paul Saints when they were in the American Association of Independent Baseball. What was that? What were those experiences like, getting your first couple of years of play in summer baseball and in indie baseball?
Well, that was the indicator, right? Like if I could get through those seasons and enjoy it and embrace that lifestyle that you've grown accustomed to doing, like you said, those summer collegiate league games. I want to go back to that because it doesn't matter what level you've broadcasted baseball at. If you've done baseball during the summer in any league, in any capacity, it is a grind. And we all share in that. Doesn't matter if you're in the ticket office, if you work as a parking lot attendant, if you work in minor league baseball in some capacity, affiliated, unaffiliated, you know pretty early on if you love it and if you're cut out for it. So for me, I think 2011, being away from home for the first time, really, that was a big one. Being away from my family during the summer, that was an adjustment, but I realized like, hey, I kind of like doing this every day. And then 2012, it was professionally done for the first time. And now I'm living in a major media market and I'm moving halfway across the country. And that's what started it all. I feel like 2011 was really the love-hate thing where I would know then and there if that was going to be something I'd continue. I think 2012 taught me how to be a professional because Sean Aronson, who's still the play-by-play announcer with the St. Paul Saints, has mentored a lot of guys, and a lot of guys have gone on to success and have gone on to affiliated jobs because of his tutelage. He taught me how to be organized every single day, how to get yourself back and ready for that next broadcast. And he helped me a lot. He made me feel like a professional for the first time. So those two things really helped back to back. And that's what started a run of living in 6 states in 7 years for baseball. Now, there were seasonal jobs, so I wasn't living in those states for the entire year. I would basically go for half the year, spend the baseball season there, and then come back to New Jersey during the off season. But that's what kickstarted all of this craziness. So I can either blame those two, North Adams and St. Paul, or I can thank them, and I'll probably go with the latter.
And you talked about the jump that you experienced going from summer league to independent pro baseball. How about the jump from doing games in the then New York Penn League to getting a job in AA with the Richmond Flying Squirrels and then the Reading Fightin' Phils? What's that jump like for a broadcaster going from A-ball to the advanced minors at AA?
Yeah, so let's not forget, after 2013 and short season, I did 2 years in the Florida State League in 2014 and 2015. That was the first time I did all the games. So at that point, the seasons were still 144 games. I probably did at least 120. So that was really stretching it out. And that really showed me, okay, now this is for real. Let's continue onward. And I always equated it to being like the players and the coaches, John. I wanted to get to the highest level I could. I didn't know where that level was. I just wanted to continue to move up. It was probably 2015, one night on the air where it just clicked. And I said, I got this now. I know how to do this now. And then 2016, there was more development, and I'm in AA for the first time. And yeah, you're putting more pressure on yourself. I think that I probably regressed in 2016 and 2017. There was around that time that I got with an agent for the first time, and it made me not be myself. I was trying to be somebody else. I was trying to sound like a network broadcaster with golden pipes, and I wasn't being me. And so I thought I regressed in 2016 and 2017, to be quite honest with you. I thought I could have been better. And then 2018 and 2019, there was more improvement. And for the longest time, and I'm sure you've heard it talking to your network of people, guys especially that are older and more established, and they give you this advice early on that you hate to hear after a while, where they say, get the reps. And you go, oh, Jesus, enough with the reps. I need the opportunity. I'm sick of the reps. But guess what? They're right. You need the reps. And then I knew at the end of the 2019 season, I was like, I'm right on the cusp. And then 2020 happens, and we have no season. And usually there's that hangover where when you go off season to opening day, you haven't called a game in probably 6 months. Baseball wise, you might have other off season assignments, but you haven't called a baseball game in 6 months, and you're a little rusty early on. This year, I haven't called a game from September 2019 to May of 2021. I thought my first night back on the air in Trenton was one of the best games I've ever done. And I think it was only because I was starting to have fun doing it. I think for the longest time, what hurt me was the fact I wasn't having fun. I wasn't smiling on the air. I was very serious, very studious, and I had to make sure I did everything right. And then after a while, you just kind of loosen up and you say, screw it. Let's just do this. Let's go here. And I think now, 10 years in, I've never been better. That's the best part about this whole thing is I feel like now I'm finally hitting my stride. I've always equated it to stand-up comics. I'm a stand-up comic junkie. And they've always said that 10 years in clubs doing your act, it takes 10 years to perfect the act. There's maybe some balance there. Maybe there's some symmetry. My timeline's about that 10-year mark as well. So maybe there's something to it.
And you mentioned that you've called games for teams in a number of different major league organizations. How much networking is there among the minor league broadcasters within a major league team system. As we mentioned before, you were recently on the Blue Jays podcast hosted by Tyler Zickel. How much communication and networking is there among broadcasters in the same system?
So I'll just go system to system, where Neil Solondz was very much a mentor for me. And if I called Neil right now and asked him for something, he'd probably help me out. That's the kind of guy he is. He's been that way with a lot of people, because he's another guy that came up through the minors. He was in Lakewood. He was in Durham, finally got his chance in Tampa Bay, and has been there ever since. So he was a great resource for me early on. I didn't get a chance to know Scott Fransky until probably after the fact. I got a chance to do a spring training game with him and Kevin Franzen in 2019. And from there, he and I stayed in touch. He reviewed some of my work after that 2019 season. And so he's another guy that now is a contact. And then now with the Blue Jays, like I said, Ben Wagner and I, during homestands, when the Blue Jays are playing and when the Thunder Bisons are home in Trenton, he and I probably text every single day. So there is more of an open dialogue with him. But I've made sure to become, I don't want to say friends, I wouldn't go that far, but I wanted to make sure to at least get to know the broadcasters in the system that I've been with at the highest level, because at the end of the day, those are the guys that are going to help you. They're the guys that understand what you're going through. A lot of times they have invaluable advice to pass along. They're willing to help you improve your demo. And that's like you've been around this long enough. It's the whole game. You got to network and you got to know the right people.
Absolutely. All right. We have to take our next break here on Behind the Mic. We'll be back with one more quick segment with GREGG CASERTA of the Trenton Thunder here on Behind the Mic on ASTV Productions. Welcome back to Behind the Mic here on ASTV Productions, simulcasting on Facebook. We're in conversation this week with GREGG CASERTA from the Trenton Thunder, also calling Buffalo Bisons games this year. We've had a good time so far talking about this year, and then going bigger picture on your journey up the minor league baseball ladder. And in this final block, I wanted to go someplace a little bit different from the baseball-centric theme we've had going on so far. And you touched on a little bit of it in the last block when we talked about your time at Fordham. But I wanted to talk about some of the other non-baseball things that you've done. And you've had a couple of really good ones that we'll get into. But what is there? Are there any assignments that come to mind for you first that you've been a part of outside of baseball that you think, you know what, that was pretty cool?
Yeah, so the first big one that comes to mind is CBS Sports Radio, where I was an update anchor pre-COVID. My 2-year anniversary was March 9th, 2020. And what happened was, once the pandemic hit, there was no sports for a while. And so they revamped the format where they weren't doing as many updates, and they stopped using part-time people like me. So I was there a little more than 2 years. I have not been back on the air there since March of 2020. Now, it's weird because I'm still technically an employee there. I still get the company emails. I'm still in touch with the program director, who's become a friend. But there just aren't spots there right now. And I love that, because that was the first major exposure I ever really got. It was something that I was brand new at, really, because I did a little bit of it in college, but most of my background was in play-by-play. I got a chance to work with Scott Farrell and Jody McDonald and guys that I had listened to growing up, and it was awesome. I mean, it paid really well. I got to work in downtown New York City. I was working every shift, overnights, middays, evenings, mornings, you name it. I did every shift, and I loved it. And it was something different. It helped me pay my rent. I thought that it would be a good place for me to be, because it gets me into the CBS family, and you don't know how that leads because of all their umbrellas and all the different stations that they have and things like that. I'm still holding out hope that I can get back there, but we don't know how that's going to be because finances in the business are not what they were pre-pandemic. A lot of places are tightening things up a little bit. They're not willing to spend as much, which is why we're still seeing a lot of the remote broadcasting. But I think as we get further along here, maybe things reopen back up in that regard.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned in our last block that you had the opportunity to cover the U.S. Open tennis tournament. I believe you covered a couple of those. What's that like for a baseball guy going into the tennis world and one of the prestigious tennis events? What was that? Was that a bit of a change of pace for you?
Completely different change of pace because, like I said before, I had no real interest in tennis. I was just looking for something to do at the radio station at WFUV because it was right at the end of the summer and then it would bridge into the first week of the school year. And I did it, I guess, I don't remember why I started doing it after my freshman year, I want to say was my first year. And I loved it. I was like, wow, this is really cool. I got to sit in the seating bowl. I could walk around because my press credential got me anywhere. I could go to any of the courts at any time. I could go into the press conference rooms, which was my whole job there. My whole job was to plug in my sound recorder into the podium, basically, grab sound from the big names, then send it back to the station so the sports anchor could use it for updates. So I didn't really have like a crazy job there. It was just really fun, and I loved it. And I was around all the beautiful people and all the expensive sponsors. And I'm like, wow, this is a pretty cool event. You got to have some serious bucks to enjoy this as a fan. And I wound up doing it for 3 straight years. And then I want to say, oh God, it was after, I think it was right when I got home from North Adams in 2011. So I wasn't in school at that point. A friend of mine put me in touch with the US Open crew that was there from Fox Sports Australia. And they used me as an intern. I was basically a runner for them. I would log tape. If, let's say, a cameraman was at court 11, I would have to bring him new batteries. I would run out to court 11 with new batteries. But I think I was the only American on their crew. And I worked in the production truck a lot. I loved it. So I want to say I did it for about 3 or 4 years there where I was at the tournament. I have not been back since. I don't think I've watched a second of tennis since. But when I was there covering it live, it was phenomenal. It was one of the best live events I've ever been a part of.
That would be a lot of fun. And kind of on the other end of the spectrum, for a few years, you did New Jersey high school sports on MSG Varsity in 2010 to 2013, I believe. What was that like covering high school sports? What did you enjoy about that?
I enjoyed it because I was working quite a bit. I was probably doing 2 or 3 games per week, and I was still living with my parents at the time. So all my spending money went into my weekend social life. All my college friends lived in New York City at that point. I wasn't in a relationship, so I spent a lot of time just going from couch to couch. I had weekends off. I did games usually like Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, or Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday. And because they're high school games, a lot of times they don't play at night. You would play a game like, let's say, 4 o'clock. You'd be done at 6. So I'd get home in time for dinner. And it was good. I had a pretty good thing going there for about 2.5, 3 years. Unfortunately, it just never really took off. I think in this area, being just outside New York City where I live, there's so many professional teams. There are so many professional teams that the high school scene is not as big as it is in other areas of the country where there aren't as many pro teams. So it was a good idea, I think, but I don't think it was executed properly. I don't know if it was rebooted, if it would have success, but I know they pumped a lot of money into it. Like I said, it was really a good thing for me there for a while, but in the end, it folded, and it got me out of that and into the college games. So in that regard, it actually helped.
And all the things we've talked about here today, from your career so far, the hustle of minor league baseball, play-by-play, everything that goes into that, doing different sports, doing different types of media, different types of projects. Are there any lessons that you think a young broadcaster could take from someone like yourself who, you are now a Major League Baseball broadcaster from that weekend with the Mets, and hopefully more coming up soon. But are there any lessons that you think a young broadcaster could take from your story?
I think professionally, something that I was always told early on, and it might have been from Dave Sims, who's now the TV voice of the Seattle Mariners, it's always say yes, always make yourself available, be willing to try new things, take chances. That's what I would say professionally. And then from a personal perspective, you have to know at an early age, you have to know when you're in, let's say, high school or college, when you're trying to decide if this is what you really want to do. Because a lot of times you choose the college because of the communications program or the radio station. That's how I ended up at Fordham. You have to have a really thick skin. You have to be able to handle adversity, because you have dealt with it, John. I have dealt with it. Anybody has dealt with it. It will beat you down to some of the lowest places you could possibly go. And you have to just have the will to battle. You have to pick yourself up off the mat. That's the thing I will say personally, is that if you don't think you can handle that adversity, then you got to do something else. I've thought about it. I've thought about it as of 5 months ago, that it was time to hang it up and do something else. I didn't know what that was going to be, but I thought that this business was done. I thought I was dead in the water. And somehow I got through. I could look at my own inner strength, if you want to call it that. I could look at my support system. But it was very difficult. And you just got to ride the highs and the lows. You have to enjoy the highs more than the lows. You hang on to the lows probably a little bit more, and they certainly can outnumber them, and they can really wear you down. But if you have that belief in here, if you can hang on to that and push yourself through, then you'll be all right. But to quote Journey, don't stop believing.
So as you look into the future, how do you look at your career going forward? Are there goals you still have set for yourself to reach another level? And does the way you look ahead, is that kind of different now with all that experience gained that you're talking about?
Yeah, it's different, because I always joked that all I ever wanted was to announce one major league game, and then I would drop dead in the booth as soon as the final out was recorded. I used to say this very morbidly as a goof, and I got to do 2 games, and I'm still here. And I also looked at it and said, you know what, if I walked away now, if let's say I did change gears and do something else, could I go away happy? Yeah. Because my whole goal was to say that I did a major league game. Not only that, and I'll be honest with you, because I'm my own worst critic, and I look to poke holes in everything I do, but it went really well. And so I think, yeah, it'll happen again. Maybe with the Mets, maybe with somebody else, but I truly believe that it's going to happen again. Early on, every guy that signs up to do this, that wants to be a play-by-play guy, says, I want to be Joe Buck. I want to be the guy that does the Super Bowl. I want to do the World Series. I want to be that guy. But you realize that there's 4 guys on the planet that are at that level. It's okay to be somebody else. More importantly, it's okay to be yourself. And for me, if we're going to nitpick, my ideal, John, would be to do Major League Baseball on the radio, even though they tell you television pays more, and it does. There is something beautiful and poetic about doing it on the radio, because you are the storyteller. And I would love to do college basketball in the offseason. I would love to just do some college hoops for one of the TV networks. I don't know if that's going to happen. That's a part of the story that hasn't been written yet. But in an ideal world, if I could just work consistently and continue to have fun and make a good living, and just continue to work like this and do something I enjoy, something you and I've talked about, being able to get back into it and do something you love, that's life, man. That's the key right there. So, I hope it continues this way. It's been a good couple of weeks. It's been a good couple of months, and hopefully it continues along that way.
And we definitely appreciate you coming on with us here tonight and spending an hour with us talking about your season and your career. A lot of fun and a lot of things learned as well along the way. So Greg, I will never be able to say it enough, but thank you for this, man.
My friend, it is a pleasure. And like I said to you, not only will I come back if you'll have me, but please stay in touch. You know, my phone is always open for you, and you and I will be talking a lot more after this.
You know it. All right. And before we let you go, where can people listen to your games?
You can go to 920 ESPN New Jersey. 920 ESPN New Jersey. Their website is great. They've got an app for smartphones and tablets. All the Trenton Thunder home games are on there. TrentonThunder.com for all the other info. And my own personal website is just my name, GREGG CASERTA. The spelling you see on the crawl there, it's GREGGCASERTA.com. So, yeah, maybe I'll be talking to some of you real soon.
Sounds great. All right, we'll check you out there for sure. All right, we'll go to one more break. We'll say bye to Greg, but I'll be back on the other side to wrap up another week here on Behind the Mic and get you ready for next week. Thanks for watching. More time, welcome back to Behind the Mic here on ASTV. Just finished up our visit with GREGG CASERTA from the Trenton Thunder, who is also calling Buffalo Bisons games this year, while they're displaced with the Toronto Blue Jays using Sahlen Field in Buffalo. Had a great time with Greg talking about things about the Blue Jays this season, what he's seen calling their games this season, and going big picture on his career, stories and experiences from his climb up the minor league ladder, culminating in his major league debut on New York Mets radio back in June, and then just having some fun with some of the other experiences that he's had in the sportscasting business outside of baseball. Once again, huge thanks to Greg for coming on, visiting with us this evening, and you can find him calling Buffalo Bisons games for the time being until something changes with the Blue Jays, but you can find him doing Bisons games for now, and then when things normalize, whenever that might be, he is doing Trenton Thunder MLB Draft League games. So before we sign off, well, thank you for watching once again on your Friday night, wherever you've been tuned in from. Reminder that you can find all of our shows and archives at astvproductions.com. We simulcast on Facebook, and we have further updates over on Twitter. We're live, same place, same time, every night, every Friday night, 5 Pacific, 8 Eastern. And we have further updates on Twitter, so check in on Twitter for our guest update for next week. And it looks like for next week, we will probably be talking hockey again as the Stanley Cup Finals are underway. So once again, thanks so much for tuning in. We'll talk to you next week. This is Jonathan Hodgson for my guest, GREGG CASERTA. Thanks for watching Behind the Mic. We'll talk to you next week.